if you're not doing all that stuff, forget about it. You can do all the anabolic steroids, get your testosterone levels optimized. It ain't going to do anything for you if you're not doing the work.
It's that time again to get my blood work done to see where my numbers are. Again, the one big thing for me is I'm keeping track of it. It's so precise. You know, I competed in bodybuilding and powerlifting and martial arts, but that was all over decades ago. And so how can I continue to keep this physique and be this strong at this stage? And so that is by optimizing my health with Titan Medical. It all stems from one thing: your blood work, what's going on inside of you. And that's the main thing that I'm focused about, is see how I can continue to not just be in the game. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be a weekend warrior. I don't want to say you got a dad bod. I want to be the pinnacle of the health and fitness industry decades after I competed. And I've always said this too. You got so many of these guys that were with me in the 80s and 90s, and they keep putting the pictures up from the 80s and 90s. I don't want to be that guy. I like the fact that I can still put up pictures of me today, even though I won the universe back in the 90s. That's the goal for me. I don't know what your goal is, but I can tell you this. I know you want to live, and I know you want to live your best life. And that starts with blood work. Over at Titan Medical, start today.
Well, it's a funny world, but we live deep in this. We've been health nuts since the early 80s. So we love doing what we're doing. The one thing that I worry about is, to me, it seems like it's a free ticket as you age. It's something you could, again, I'm speaking of the person that's gone through life, a pretty healthy person already. I worry about the youngsters that just go out there, the college kids, I'm just going to get jacked. I want to get big and jacked, because social media is something I have to deal with, and I see these youngsters going, I want to be as strong and big as you. And it's like, okay, well, take your time, eat, train, put some years in. But I feel like it is for somebody that may be watching this in their mid 30s or 40s or 50s, here's your free ticket now. Here's your get out of jail card for Monopoly. You know what I mean? It's like, you've done well. Now your body's kind of breaking down. Now go see a doctor like yourself and see if there's something that they can do to help you optimize the health. Now, I think that's great. And I think for people, I wish they would look into that aspect. What I do worry about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the young kid whose body is working well, that is 20, that can go do the hard work, that can go train every day and eat well, goes, forget it, I want to be this monster, and is using their health or longevity card now when everything's fine instead of waiting. Do you see my point there?
Oh yeah, no,
I worry about that.
That's more of a generational thing, in my opinion. I know I sound like my grandpa now, but I've lived long enough in 60 plus years to see the difference in the generations. And it's your point with the internet showing, so much more of what's out there. Even 30 years ago, if you didn't come out to Venice Gold's gym and see it, you wouldn't have believed it unless you happened to pick up a rare rag that showed, bodybuilders in it, So people didn't even know about it back then. Now they see it all over the place with the internet, and they go, oh yeah, well, I can do that too. I saw a post, it was either this morning or yesterday, that was to that point on Instagram about, you can't look like, it was Mind Pump. You can't look like Ronnie Coleman, who's told you his story, without anabolic steroids. So, you have these kids that think, they think they can look like that. That's a whole other story, despite their genetics, despite not putting in, you said years. I know you meant decades, lots of years, right?
They don't want to hear decades. They want to hear 6 weeks.
And that's a generational thing, I believe. Now, of course, there were people from my generation who thought the same thing, but they were, a minority that just were way over there. I think you have a lot of people that are actually somewhat well-educated and not that ignorant that are thinking they can do it in 6 weeks or something, even a little bit longer than that. But I mean, they don't understand. And that's why you see a lot of injuries, by the way, not to get too far afield of the point you're making. But that's why a lot of things go wrong. And there's no point in starting something when you don't need it because you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. In other words, if you already have a decent level of testosterone, you're not in that stage yet where, okay, things have started not working and you're replacing it and making a step forward. You're just changing out one for the other. Now you can say, okay, yeah, but they double the dose and hope for the most, right? You're still.
Put that on a shirt. That's our new shirt next week.
That was what they were doing back in the day, and it doesn't work. To add more of what I would call unleaded, low octane fuel to the tank is not going to make any difference. And again, not to get too much into the weeds, you only have so many androgen receptors. If you pump up your testosterone to super physiologic levels, who cares? And that goes into a whole other subject of, well, that's probably why the people that did become very successful, like Ronnie Coleman, were using anabolic steroids along with their training and all the other stuff, by the way, that you have to do if you even have a chance, because that's the high octane stuff. So to your point, I think, the kids, as it were, they're saying, oh, I'm 20, 25 years old and I want to look like that, so I just need to add some testosterone. That's so far from the reality. Because again, all you're doing is robbing Peter to pay Paul, and all you're doing is adding more low octane stuff. The change you might get is minimal compared to the alternative that we're talking about. The reality.
I've learned a lot over the 4 decades of health and fitness and being in the trenches with the greatest in the world. And one of those things I've learned a lot more about and how to build better muscle is nutrition and how it has changed over the decades. And that's why I have the Titan meal plan for you guys out there that are confused about nutrition. I'm going to set you straight. Get a hold of me today. The link will be in the comments down below for you guys. Everybody, get over to the Titan meal plan, and I'll see you in the Titan crew where I will fine-tune any difficulties that you're having.
And again, we can go deep into every subject you're talking about. And the point of, you can go out there, you can train, you can eat well, you can get on whatever you want to get on. You're not going to be Ronnie. It's a rarity. But that being said, it's such an amazing thing. First of all, I believe food is such a health. That's medicine. If you eat right, if you're looking and doing what you're supposed to do, if you go train, and again, I agree that it's decades of training. And if you can train through your teens and your 20s, and then you decide later in your 30s that you want to check your numbers and get checked, and if there's something wrong, then jump on HRT. I fully support that and think that's a great thing, because then you just enhanced your body at a certain age when the numbers aren't matching up to what they should be.
And we're talking about body composition changes. What about brain function? For example, let's pick one. We could talk about libido, energy, good mood, because testosterone's nature's antidepressant. But if we just pick that one, well, and to go back, before I go off on that tangent, sorry, let me finish one thought. That is, we both refer to the training, and we alluded to how much more it is than that. If you're eating alfalfa sprouts and carrot juice and trying to get big, you ain't gonna get there, man. Diet is huge, getting sleep is huge, not to make puns with the word huge, but it's so important that if you're not doing all that stuff, forget about it. You can do all the anabolic steroids, get your testosterone levels optimized. It ain't going to do anything for you if you're not doing the work. And there's a lot more to it than just the training aspect, was my point. And I think I'm just chiming in with yours. Where was I going? What was the other
Brain. Brain.
Oh, the brain function, speaking of which, and memory and whatnot.
So we just finished one movie. And turned out great. I am loving it. I love the dailies that we see. On to the next project. You finish, you keep going, you keep trying to go. That's, I guess, a better way to say it. And this next movie that I have booked, this is going to take all of me. This is going to take slice to the bone, all the character development, but also I need to be able to move and grow and keep that strength through this process. You'll understand why that is after you see the movie. But keeping the strength is key when you're dieting. And so I'm going to show you how to do that on Power Bodybuilding. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you over there.
When they think HRT, they only think one thing, is muscle. It seems as though that's all they think of is like that one aspect when there's, like you said, libido, the mind, everything, the full package.
It deserves to be said that probably has something to do with the powers that be, physicians, regulators, whatever, looking at it down their nose saying, oh, that's just for that. Oh, you just want to have, it's more of a hedonism thing. You just want to look better so that the men and women will look at you differently, because women are doing this too. So that might have something to do with why it hasn't been accepted for as long as it should have been back in time. But when the brain, if just to use the brain as an example, we've got plenty of research showing that with rare exceptions, there's not to use a light bulb example for the brain, there's not a problem with the filament in the bulb. Okay, that might happen later. Of course, there's all different forms of dementia. But for most of us that start complaining in their 30s even, 40s, 50s about, brain fog, it has nothing to do with the filament in the bulb. It has to do with the energy flowing to the bulb, just like the light would flicker otherwise. Okay, a real light bulb, that's what's going on. And people don't think of testosterone as a fix for that brain fog until they use it and realize, oh, by the way, I didn't come in complaining about that. But man, doc, 90 days after they started,
That's great.
I'm thinking straight now. I'm clear. I'm firing off like I used to be. Answers to questions on Jeopardy or whatever. So
That's pretty good.
there's a lot more to it than just the body composition changes.
Jeffrey, what's some other questions you were thinking on the way over?
What?
Because I think the one big one was that we agree that at any age, if the markers are bad, some I know 25-year-olds that their markers are terrible, and so they should start HRT because you don't want to be that young and already living an old man's life.
Absolutely not. And that's what's sad about, the way we have looked at it to date and still do in some areas. Again, it depends on where you are. We are here in Los Angeles and arguably ahead of the game in terms of just the general population being aware of these things because we're so into fitness here and whatnot. But you could pick Houston, Texas, and you go, Houston, Texas? Yeah. Houston, I think, might be a larger market than Los Angeles even. And you say, well, that's just because they're bigger in terms of population. That might be so, but there's a lot of places that have a large population that aren't as well educated about these things, is my point. So it depends on where you are, what's available, what's acceptable, et cetera. But for a 25-year-old that's in that boat, a lot of times doctors will just look over the table and say, well, you're too young.
Yeah, they will.
Now, there's some good points to that where you want to look into, I suggested earlier, secondary hypogonadism, where you wouldn't necessarily want to put someone on testosterone replacement if you could fix the problem being that, your pituitary is not sending a signal, for example, the testicles do their job. If you can right that ship, perfect example is, there might be a tumor, typically not cancerous, that produces prolactin, a prolactinoma we call it. And if you can either remove the tumor or tamp down on the prolactin, the signal will continue to return to signaling the testicles the way they're supposed to, and you've got a 25-year-old who's happy as a clam again. But to put an age limit on it is nuts. To put a number on it is the way they used to do it too. I remember there was a time
what your level
range,
is?
the reference interval.
Okay.
Yeah. So now I want to say first, before I say another word, that Abraham Morgenthaler is one of the leaders in discovery, disseminating information that's valuable about TRT. But I want to say that there was a time where he would say, well, 450 total testosterone or below, nanograms per deciliter, is the cutoff. And you're like, wait a minute, where do you come up with that? And by the way, if it's 449 is versus 451, how do you deal with that? And then you factor in, you have laboratory error when you take the test, meaning we draw the blood and get the assay. Since then, we have now, and he particularly along with an international consensus back in 2016. So all over the world, the leaders in that field got together and came up with like 9 resolutions from that meeting. One of which is so important, which is who cares about the number? With the caveat that if it's 1,200, which is super physiologic, that's not your issue. But if it's 450, 350, or 650, what if freaks of nature we know have high levels of testosterone naturally, right? And to them, they've been at 1100 their whole life, and then all of a sudden they're at 650. They feel pretty bad because of that, perhaps. The point being that you get where I'm going. Is you treat people, not the numbers, right? The numbers come into play, but if someone comes in and says, hey, I don't have the energy I used to, the libido, et cetera, all the symptoms of low T, well, you look into their testosterone levels, no matter what age they are. And if it's appropriate, you treat them.
We have Mona here who we did her blood markers. And the reason why I want to say Mona is because of the fact that she's someone that visually looks ridiculous in a great way. Miss Universe, she won that, and she walks around and she trains 2 times, 3 times a week. And she looks better than pretty much any 50-year-old that I've seen.
Well, let me help you out because I know it's your wife, so it's hard to boast about her. Although I don't have any problem boasting about mine, you can boast about yours. But not only that, and then she has to ask for refunds regularly because there's not enough weight in the gym for her, right? I mean, so it's not like she's working out a few times and looks great, but she's also functionally doing fantastically, right?
With 11 testosterone for a female. Now, from what I understand, 11 is in the tank. Terrible. And then we have a friend that's overweight, same age, and she's like at 60, which is good for a woman. It's very high for a woman.
That would be outside the typical reference interval, borderline maybe in a Quest, but not a LabCorp. LabCorp uses up to 50 nanograms per deciliter for a female. It's total.
So it's good, really good. And their energies are completely opposite. It's like Mona can train, she does everything, even with that low T. And so it'd be the individual again. Maybe it's not the time that she needs to do HRT because she's still moving and grooving. But there's a secondary fault to it, right? Is there issues that will be caused by that low T in the future? Because diabetes runs into the family, that kind of stuff. So would it be smart, even though she's running well, and the correlation was 2 things, because we were talking about do the person. And so our friend who's at 60, and you look at her, she's heavy, she's all this stuff, and you would go, well, maybe your T's wrong. Maybe you're, without testing it, maybe you have low T and that's why you're carrying extra weight, and that's why you're sluggish. Then you find out it's great. And then you see Mona and you go, I bet your T's great. And then you find out that it's low. So hopefully you guys understand the correlation there. It's 2 individuals that would completely opposite.
Right. In terms of their T levels.
And visually.
Right. And functionality, cosmetics, That is just driving the point further, and then you have to treat the individual without going into the weeds too much. I keep promising myself I won't do, but that's a perfect example. It's highly likely. And this is why you do have to look at the individual, because if she came into the office, this person you're talking about, if she had signs that can be visible of metabolic syndrome because she has something called PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, they typically have higher than normal testosterone, but can be overweight, have acne. Signs would be, men and women have hair in the same places, we always forget, but the best way to put it is like sideburns that, it has nothing to do with being male or female. It's just some people have more hair than others. These are things that are brought about by excessive amounts of testosterone, but also excessive amounts of insulin being produced. You have an insulin insensitivity. This is part of the metabolic dysfunction that's associated with PCOS. So you're just driving it even further home, whether you know it or not, that you absolutely can't just go, oh, how is their number? Yeah. It's included in the evaluation, but it starts with a complaint. Hey, I'm not happy with what's going on here. Now, and that brings them in. I always say, you didn't come here because you woke up and said, I think my testosterone's low this morning. You came in because you have complaints that are associated with low testosterone. So that's the starting point. But to just look at the numbers is not the way to go, is certainly one point. I'm going to have to go back and review my filament in the light bulb, because I had another point I was going to make that's along the same lines about, again, just being individualized. I think you were starting to allude to, still there's a correlation between low testosterone and some disease states.
Right, that would be my question, because I worry, as baby mama, I need her around.
Yeah.
So even though her T level is low, She visually looks great. She's strong as an ox. She doesn't stop moving, which makes me tired. So it's like, but by continuing to ride this, I guess you would say, like keep running that ship into the ground,
Mm-hmm.
is there something that maybe she should look at because of the diabetes in the family, that she should start T because of the fact that in 10 years, by you continuing to live like this, something might occur?
It's one avenue, and this is where it gets into, I don't want to talk about how we practice medicine because it would get a little too far into the weeds, but keeping it fairly simply, if we just use that as an example, you can say, okay, well, we check something called her hemoglobin A1C. Her average sugar is over about a 3-month period. We look at her fasting insulin to see if it's high or low, to see if there's some early signs of the diabetes that runs in her family, right? That is definitely a consideration. Now, is it that her other family members have this because of poor choices in terms of eating and not exercising, not having enough muscle on their frame, et cetera, or not? That could be the sole reason why they have developed it and she hasn't. But the point I'm making is that, and I think you're doing the same, if you look at the individual with these correlations in mind, it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, well, because, for example, you have a history of this, that, or the other, coronary artery disease, type 2 diabetes, we should get you on that. Because again, it's just correlation, and she may be doing everything that her other family members or other people like her don't do that keep it at bay, and it will never be an issue. She might have a predilection to it for one reason or another, but because of what she does day to day, it's not an issue. But it still could be. That's why you don't make such general statements like you see on Instagram all the time from PhDs, typically from people that don't have clinical practice. And I'm not saying, well, I have a clinical practice and you do, but that's where you see the reality, not just what you read in a book in a particular study that might pick up on things or not, because you're not focused on certain things, you're focused on others. But the point is, it's still something you keep in mind because of that correlation. You say, let's continue to look at your testosterone. Let's continue to look at the things we're concerned with, and testosterone might be an adjunct therapy, something we start despite the fact that you're still killing the gym,
Right.
still look great, still have all the injuries, still run Mike O'Hearn ragged. But this is one way that we might be able to help stave off what seems to be happening if your insulin's climbing, fast insulin's climbing, your sugars are rising, and you're doing everything else you can to keep healthy, and yet it's not working.